Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill about provision for screening for neurodivergent conditions in primary schools and to make provision about teacher training relating to neurodivergent conditions and for connected purposes. I stand here in this Parliament to represent all those who need a different type of support because their brains work differently. And the bill that I'm presenting today is one important step in getting everyone the education they deserve. We have a principle, and have for more than a century had a principle in this country, of a universal education system, and making sure we have proper tailored provision for children with neurodivergent conditions is a critical part of that education. Now, society now recognises neurodiversity more than it ever has. We have a much more positive debate about neurodiversity than I think, certainly at any time in my lifetime. We have more recognition broadly in society of the strengths neurodiversity can bring, and also of the support that people with a neurodivergent condition need to thrive. I think that attitudes over a generation have shifted. I've noticed this myself. I am dyslexic. For over 20 years, I hid my dyslexia, and I felt a sort of sense of shame about it, which now I see as wrong, but that is how I felt. But that impact in terms of society's attitude has reduced. But I'm one of the lucky ones. Because I was good at maths, I could get through school well, and I got to an amazing university. And it was there that my dyslexia was identified. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, still today, only 1 in 5 dyslexic children get that dyslexia identified in school. And I think that Parliament and the law has not yet caught up with this change in society, and there is further to go, and that is why I presented this bill. The bill will make provision for essentially 2 things. Firstly, the early identification in primary school, preferably in the first year of primary school, for neurodivergent conditions, including dyslexia, but also including the broad spectrum of neurodivergent conditions. Because it's only if you measure these things and find out how each individual child's brain works that you can then best get the tailored support. And then secondly, to ensure that teacher training is strengthened. Now, I recognise the work that the Minister and his predecessors have done in introducing specific requirements for neurodivergent conditions to be part of the teacher training syllabus. But there is still much more that needs to be done. And I also recognise the work he's done in the Green Paper that was published last year in looking for early identification of these conditions, but there is still far too little that happens, and turning policy from a green consultative paper into action on the ground is absolutely critical. Now, neurodivergent people often have skills that are increasingly needed in the world. The straight line thinking can be done by the computers, and artificial intelligence is accelerating that change yet more. But the future jobs need skills like creativity and lateral thinking, enhanced communication skills, which are often more prevalent amongst those who are neurodiverse. It's great to see some employers like GCHQ and Deloitte and UBS, Universal Music, proactively hiring neurodivergent people. But if people don't know that they have such a condition, they will not be empowered to do what is necessary to make the most of these extra skills. And whilst it's great to talk about the positive benefits that a neurodiverse condition can bring, the stark reality is that also people with a neurodivergent condition are far more likely to be excluded from school, far more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. Academics describe this as the school-to-prison pipeline. Shockingly, 97% of children excluded from primary school had a special educational need, and 80% of children cautioned or sentenced in the youth justice system have a special educational need. 80%. And these are nearly all teenagers. And if that condition could be identified early when they're 5 or 6, then they can get the support that they need, and the impact on the nation's finances, let alone the impact on those individuals, would be significantly improved. Research has consistently demonstrated the efficacy of early interventions in supporting children, neurodivergent children. For example, research by the Education Endowment Fund revealed that those who received the NELI programme made the equivalent of 4 months additional progress in language skills on average compared to pupils who did not get access to NELI, and the department has funded access to NELI in many but not all primary schools, and I welcome that, but there's more to do. This shows the cost-effective nature of early intervention. And what is more, technology is making this more and more possible, because the power of artificial intelligence to make these identifications early, to have the screening for all children so we understand how children's brains work, so that their teachers can help them better, so they understand themselves, and so then those who need the formal diagnosis can be put forward for it. This is critical. According to the London School of Economics, published last November, 15% of children with SEND lived in the most affluent decile, and only 6% in the most deprived. Now, these statistics are important because they show that the distribution of access to a formal diagnosis is clearly unfair. It cannot be true that 15% of children with SEND come from those in the most affluent decile, while only 6% in the least affluent. The reason that this is how it happens in reality is because, obviously, in the most affluent areas, parents are more likely to be able to pay themselves. So there is an issue of social justice here in terms of access to this provision. So we must take action to have universal screening, to identify who has these conditions, and then to make sure that the distribution of the formal diagnosis is more fair. Now, in the last couple of minutes that I have, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to thank the huge numbers of campaigners, including many who are here today. I want to draw attention to the work of the Accessible Learning Foundation, which campaigns on this subject, both in terms of policy and in terms of getting the availability of these screeners into schools. I also want to thank Dan Harris, and I want to share his son's powerful story as an example of when this can go right. His son, the Joshi man, was identified as autistic very early on in life. His parents were told that he may never talk, but due to his loving parents and the ability of them to get him the support that he needed, and the technology and his reader that he carries around with him, he can now communicate, learn how to ride a bike, help cook meals, and I was incredibly moved to see in the last month or so can now speak a few words. This shows what can happen if we get this right. So as this bill progresses, I would ask the government to listen carefully to the evidence, to the science, to the data, and make sure that we get the access that children deserve, so that we have equality of opportunity in our education system, both for those whose brains think in a straight line and for those who think differently.
Great, well done.
The question is that the Right Honourable Member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Yasmin Qureshi, Jim Shannon, Henry Smith, Holly Mumbycroft, Jane Hunt, Andrew Selous, Tom Hunt, Kelly Tolhurst, Paul Bristow, and myself. Yeah.
Matt Hancock.
Neurodivergent Conditions Screening and Teacher Training Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 21st of June.
Friday the 21st of June. Thank you. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.